Debbie Gregson, where are you? Let's take a question for you.
So the former minister, Zach Goldsmith, quit last week over what he called Rishi Sunak's climate apathy. Has this government dropped its commitment to fight climate change?
So Zach Goldsmith said, the problem, and he was talking to the Prime Minister, the problem is not that the government is hostile to the environment, it is that you, our Prime Minister, are simply uninterested. Dale, you're the obvious person to come to, first of all, on this, with your green credentials and ecotricity. What's your view?
I don't think they ever had a commitment to the environment, actually, so I don't think they've dropped anything. They have dropped a commitment to spend £11.6 billion of foreign aid on the climate. That's a fact. Zach Goldsmith was unhappy about that. But, you know, he referred to this as the greatest challenges of our time when he was saying that the Prime Minister simply is uninterested. And I think that's fair. If you look at what the Conservatives are doing on the climate crisis, we've signed up to the Paris Accord and all the good things around the world that everybody else in the world has. But we are pulling in the exact opposite direction of where we need to go. We're opening coal mines in Cumbria, drilling for North Sea oil and gas, which is new. We haven't done that for many years. When the international, global, scientific and political consensus is we cannot afford to drill for more fossil fuels. It's just throwing fossil fuels on the fire. Last year, the UN said it was moral and economic madness to drill for fossil fuels. This is what our government are doing. Meanwhile, they maintain the ban on onshore wind, our cheapest, fastest, cleanest form of energy that we can build, and they're very unhelpful to large solar as well. We can get to 100% green energy in our economy in just 10 years with no public money, because these technologies need no public money, and we can have permanently low energy bills, eradicate fuel poverty and be energy independent as a country, creating hundreds of thousands of really good long-term jobs. It's a wonderful opportunity for us, and our government have turned their back on it because they want to make green issues part of the culture war that which is all this party has, all this government has, is to create enemies like the EU, like public sector workers. And now green energy is the new enemy, saying that we can't afford the transition, we have to slow it down, that it costs money. All of this stuff is untrue. And drilling for North Sea oil and gas is economic madness, because it won't save us any money and it will just inflame the climate crisis.
Well, there's lots of things I know you want to come back on there, Danny. No, it wasn't. And I don't think Dale's talked for as long as you have yet in the programme, but I'm giving you your chance now.
Right? You don't know the Prime Minister, right? I know the Prime Minister. I know he's not disinterested.
I think Zach Goldsmith knows him.
He's not disinterested in this stuff at all. We've now got 41% of our energy coming from renewable resources. Does anybody argue with the agenda that you should, be more green, and that we've got massive challenges in the climate space and the climate emergency, and we've got to deal with that? Nobody disputes that at all. The question is, how do you get there, and the journey of getting there? And the idea that with what's going on in Europe at the moment, you can just cut North Sea oil and gas drilling. I mean, even the unions who are involved in this just say this is an absolutely absurd plan. Unfortunately, we don't live in an idealistic world where we can just cut all the cars, turn everything off, and go and build loads of wind farms. It doesn't work like that. No one disputes the end state of this cause. But firstly, you know, the agenda that you just throw it up in the air and come back with all these green policies and forget everything else just doesn't work in the real world.
I didn't say that.
And secondly, no, you're saying that we need to go accelerate straight towards this green target where you are investing all this money in wind instead of drilling for oil and gas.
No public money.
And we're trying to become energy independent and get energy security in this country at the moment. And so cutting off those supplies is the complete opposite direction of what we're trying to do. So look, a lot of it's a balance, right? And Zach has his views and he's left government. He's a very passionate individual on these issues, and I respect that. But it is not true to say the Prime Minister is disinterested in this stuff, and that is borne out by the evidence.
Can I say one thing, please?
Briefly, and then I must bring the rest.
Every pound we invest in fossil fuels, if we invest instead in renewable energy, we get 2.5 times more jobs, and we get twice as much GDP growth. It's foolish to invest in fossil fuels.
Bridget. So, I mean, Labour is saying that it doesn't want new oil and gas drilling, but nonetheless, if we look at Rossell, I think it's called, which is a new oil field which is being proposed at the moment, you're not opposing that, are you?
We don't. If
Rossbank, sorry.
Yes, an incoming Labour government would have a real push around renewable energy and around moving to clean energy. We've got a really big commitment around that, and the reason for that is that we want to cut bills, we want to create jobs, and we want to make sure that we're not so exposed in the future where it comes to energy security. We've been living through a cost of living crisis where we've all seen a real big spike in our gas and electricity bills. And the reason for that, the reason we're so uniquely exposed, is that we aren't doing enough to protect our own energy security here. We've been too vulnerable to international shocks, to Putin's aggression. We need to generate more here, and that's what Labour's plan is all about. But I think there is a really great opportunity in responding to this big, kind of very terrifying prospect of climate change to create more jobs in communities like Fleetwood, in coastal communities, in former industrial communities, like my part of the world in Sunderland. I think it's a really big opportunity if we want to harness that.
But
it's
the people who
interrupted jobs and give people
the
skills.
people who interrupted Keir Starmer earlier today, and you were at that, it was a big education announcement this morning, Green New Deal. They don't seem terribly impressed with Labour's proposals.
Well, that's their right. We're a democracy. People can express their views. I have no issue at all with young people being passionate about what they want to see change in the world. That's fantastic, great. But we have a really big commitment around the shift that we need to see towards net zero to make sure that our children and our grandchildren live in a better world.
But so when it comes to the Rossbank oil field, which is just under consideration at the moment, Labour may be the next government, we can't say for sure, Rosebank, but we can't say for sure. But if Labour said now, if we get in government, we're not going to let that go ahead, that would probably kill it. But you're not prepared to do that.
Because we need to manage this transition. We've seen in the past, and my community lived through it, we saw in the past what happened when you rushed very fast without government planning, where we saw the big shutdown of major industries. We need to do this carefully, but there is a real opportunity to create jobs. This is for communities, I think, that really need those well-paid, highly skilled jobs.
Man there in the blue sweater.
If I understand the gentleman correctly on the end, he's saying that we could be totally green energy in 10 years. What are we supposed to do for the next 10 years? Do I turn off my gas boiler at home and freeze? Do I not drive my car?
But let me get back
It's
to
not realistic.
Okay.
Stop oil are trying to get us from going to sporting events and everything else. It's not realistic to stop for 10 years.
Okay. The woman there in the white shirt.
All this talk going on about the climate change, all the strategy, I cannot understand why all the thousands of houses that are being built all around the country, it's not stipulated that they put solar power on them. It's just built into the houses. It helps the environment and it helps the people that live in them.
Okay. And the woman right at the back there.
We keep hearing all this talk about it creating more jobs, but how's it going to create more jobs in a workforce that's already not got the skill set? Where's the funding going to come from? How are you going to enrol people in education ways into that sort of field? Specifically in engineering, you'd need people to operate that machinery, etc. Where's it coming from? Because you're already failing to support the existing economy in those sort of sectors.
Okay, Dale, there's lots of questions. I'm going to come back to you, but just let me bring Kate in.
So where I think I agree with Dale, correct me if I'm wrong, is there is a huge win for the government here. It would be difficult to do politically, but it would be life-changing for all of us, and that would be to shake up and liberalize the planning system. It is taking over a decade to build energy infrastructure that should take a matter of years. And Dale says we don't need that much state money, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. You have private businesses that are lining up to invest. They know this is the future, but there's so much uncertainty around whether or not they're going to be able to build, whether or not they're going to be able to complete their project. So there is a massive win if the government wants to show that it's serious about net zero, that it could do on the planning side. And I think that would be hugely welcome. But of course, in the past year, there has been a shift in priorities from things like net zero to the cost of living crisis. And I think that's quite right. As the gentleman just said right there, I mean, people are already deeply concerned about their monthly bills, let alone people asking them to make even bigger sacrifices right now. Inflation is sky high, it's stubborn, it's not coming down. Interest rates are also starting to bite. This is not the right time, I don't think, to be asking people to make the kinds of changes that Just Stop Oil want to see that would reduce our living standards. I mean, carbon emissions in the UK currently are back down to where they were in the Victorian era. They've fallen by about 47%. We are already making great strides through those wonderful technological advancements. This country is dedicated to going green. We do not have to reduce our living standards and dramatically change the way that we live to succeed in this. But there are things the government can do around planning. Let's get building, and that would really show a commitment to net zero.
Okay. Dale, let me come back to you. So 2 points. One, what are we supposed to do in the meantime? And also, you're making a point about the Just Stop Oil protest, and of course, you are one of the funders of Just Stop Oil. I know you fund other things as well. And you're making the point at the back there about training. How are we going to train all these people to do all these jobs? And who's going to be paying for that?
And there was a third point about new housing. Why doesn't it have solar panels? I can tell you why. because David Cameron took it away. There was a code for sustainable building that was in place. It had been worked on for years by the building industry, and just before it came into being, David Cameron took it away. He called it green crap. It was one of the things he killed off along with onshore wind. The other question, nobody is saying we have to give up living for this 10-year transition. It's about turning one thing up and one thing down. It's about not investing in new fossil fuels. We know we can't afford to burn them. It's investing instead in green energy, where we get more jobs and more GDP growth. Fossil fuels can't give us energy independence because it'll take 4 years, for one thing, to get anything new out of the North Sea. And once we've got it, 20 years later, it's gone. Fossil fuels are a single-use fuel.
And what about the man's point about the protests? Because obviously we saw protests at Wimbledon just yesterday.
Yes, renewable energy.
The Ashes. Yes, well...
I've got to say this.
I know, but I can't just give you an unlimited platform, Dale. You need to address the questions.
Such a big... I'm addressing all the questions.
Well,
you missed the House question.
OK, no, and I'm glad you reminded me. But what about the protest point?
What was the point?
The point was you were saying that you were not enjoying the fact that sporting events were being disrupted.
I understand, but look, if you look at Wimbledon yesterday, rain stopped play more than the protesters did, right? The protest is vital. It did. Add the minutes up, it did, right? There's a lot of fuss
but we
in our
can't actually
country.
stop the rain.
No.
But
well, actually,
it's a decision to go and spread jigsaws all over the court.
If you look at what's happening in the climate crisis, we're creating more rain, more events of rain and intense rain. So this is the climate coming home to roost in sporting events, and that will be a big deal.
But just to be clear, so you support what happened at the Ashes when people invaded the pitch and going on?
There's a great harm going on in the world. The climate crisis, according to the UN, has already killed 4 million people, and every year it makes 20 million homeless. Right? That's a real disruption.
OK, and what about the point at the back? Because this is going to turn into Dale Vince show. I don't want that to happen. The point about who's going to pay to train all these people?
Transferable skills. In the oil and gas sector right now, we've got so many engineers that have transferable skills into the renewable energy sector.
Johnny.
It's not a problem.
Look,
you are desperate to come back in.
Firstly, with what Bridget said about the Labour Party, I mean, it's all like apple pie, right? We all want our kids to grow up in a greener future. No one disputes that. The trouble is you can't commit to one side of the argument or the other. You get funded by Just Stop Oil, right, which you're not going to give back. Is Keir Starmer give back his money to Just Stop Oil?
What are you talking about? That's just categorically
no, it's not. You give money to...
Yes, that is not the same thing.
That's such a twist.
That is not
Johnny,
the
come on.
same
give
thing.
money, don't you? You give money to Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, right? Funding the protests.
Did you hear what you just said?
Funding the protests.
That is categorical.
But just to be clear, Johnny,
no.
Facts matter. Just to be clear, Dale Vince has funded some politicians of the Labour Party, including Keir Starmer. Just Stop Oil, as an organisation, has not supported the Labour Party.
That was what you said.
Just Stop Oil.
And that was what you said, Johnny.
Just Stop Oil.
Johnny,
Would
you like to...
It's the same thing.
You were very keen to pick me up. Would you like to set the record straight now, Johnny?
In the world of Donald Trump, it's the same thing.
He's funding the same people, right? So 1.5 million. You meet Keir Starmer. Next, within 2 months, he comes out with an energy policy that basically closes off.
No, he did that last year. He did that last year at Davos.
You met him just before that,
I haven't met him.
He says he's going to close off all oil and gas stuff, right? And you suddenly, that is exactly how it goes. You go and give money to the Labour Party. They produce Just Stop Oil policies. They're behind all these... No one protests where you're going with this, right? We all want a green economy. The idea you stop people going to work, getting on their jobs, going to interviews they need to go to, ambulances needing to come through. No one is going to come with you on that journey. Right? And it's incredibly arrogant to think that your cause is so much more important than everyone else that you have a right to stop people going to an interview or stop people going to jobs. It's not my cause.
It's everybody's cause.
It is your cause.
You're
funding it the whole time. All this stuff comes from money and it goes directly to the Labour Party.
You're so careless with what you say.
Right, so you've just, again, misrepresented the position. But I condemn the tactics of Just Stop Oil. I don't support them. I think their tactics are wrong. I think their tactics are counterproductive. However, we do face a really big challenge as a country, and reducing it to this level of puerile debate and politicking, I'm afraid, does us all a disservice. This is a big challenge. We've got to grasp it.
OK. Right. Shall we take another question? I think we should.
I like this topic.
I know, I know, Dale.
I like it too.
But there are other things the audience want to talk about, which is not dictated by you. Andrew Chapman, where are you?